What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 28th, 2018. It's also Memorial Day. Welcome to the show here, and hopefully you're having a nice, safe, enjoyable holiday. I do have one comment about Memorial Day. In fact, it's the same comment I have about all the holidays, where they've all been transformed into another opportunity to push product at you. Now, when I was growing up in that little town in New Hampshire, Memorial Day was a big deal because World War II was still a fresh memory for a lot of people. Everybody had lost somebody in that war, in Europe primarily. And so it was a very solemn occasion. There was a parade, and there would be a memorial service up in the graveyard behind the church where a lot of those tombstones had flags on them. And it was a very serious business. And even for those of us really too young to understand what the war had been about, or indeed what war was about at all, we understood this was something very important and special. Today, I look on TV, and all I see is Memorial Day sale. Come down and get a new barbecue. This is the start of summer. You need new patio furniture, blah, 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 blah. And I get that same thing, whether it's Easter or Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's just another marketing scam. And I feel like our culture has lost something in that we have forgotten or been made to forget what these holidays really stand for in the rush to get us back into the stores, wallets and credit cards in hand to buy a bunch of stuff. And Claire and I had a necessity to go out yesterday. And yes, the malls were jammed. The big box stores jammed. Everybody's out there buying stuff. It's not what the holiday's about. And even though I am opposed to war in general, and especially the current aggression being committed by the U.S. government, I would like everybody to take a moment and just think about what this holiday is supposed to mean. Because whether you agree with the wars or not, those men and those women who take that oath and put on that uniform are deserving of our respect and our remembrance. And we shouldn't let our rush to get a new lawn chair get in the way of that. Because while our government may lack integrity and reject the Constitution, the vast majority of the military people I know truly believe in keeping their oaths, keeping their promises, and they are strict constitutionalists. And we shouldn't forget them. That's what this day is all about. Not forgetting those people who put on that uniform. And it really bothers me that, like so many other holidays, it's just it's been turned into another marketing ploy. And it really does. It bothers me. It annoys me a lot. All right, getting into the show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And because it's Memorial Day, the Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our program today, because she will not be able to be on the air with us this coming Friday. So you get a double dose of Lady Claire from last Friday and Monday, and I get to kick back and basically be lazy and take it easy in hour number 3 here. All right, getting into the news around the world here. Apparently 4 Russian military advisors have been killed in Syria clashes. And it's amazing the euphemisms that we have here. We used to call it spying. Now it's benign information gathering. We used to call it torture. Now it's enhanced interrogation. And these days, soldiers are all called military advisors. That one actually goes back to Vietnam, where the Pentagon was in Vietnam, but they didn't want the American people to think we were actually in combat. So our forces were all advisors. They were there to advise the South Vietnamese. Of course, yeah, they were in combat. They really were here. But apparently there was a clash between Russian soldiers and some of these U.S.-backed militants in Deir ez-Zor, and 2 of the injured soldiers died later from their wounds. 2 were killed immediately. So this is getting dangerously close to direct contact, direct conflict, if you will. Apparently, Russia has started using the Sukhoi 57 stealth fighter to carry out strikes inside Syria. And apparently they carried strikes in the Syrian province of Deir ez-Zor following that strike by the militants that killed those Russian military advisors. So apparently militants attacked an artillery battery of pro-government forces assisted by Russian military advisors, and they sent in the Sukhoi 57 to basically give them what for. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, you're not going to believe this one. Talk about chutzpah. The U.S. government, which legally has no business being in Syria to begin with, is now warning the Syrian government not to advance on the south, saying that the U.S. will take firm and appropriate measures to protect a ceasefire in southern Syria if President Bashar al-Assad's forces move against ISIS there. So this is how Alice in Wonderland this has become. The U.S. government is telling the Syrian government not to attack ISIS, or the U.S. will have an excuse to attack the Syrian government. That's how bizarro this is all becoming. First of all, the U.S. isn't supposed to be there. Syria has not invited them in. They don't have Syria's permission to be there, and yet the U.S. is still in there, issuing orders like they're in charge of things. Now, apparently, according to this story out of the Duran, you know these ISIS fighters who are leaving Syria? Apparently, according to this report, the U.S. is relocating these ISIS fighters who are leaving Syria and Iraq. They're smuggling them into Russia via Afghanistan. So now the U.S. is trying to destabilize Russia, which, well, we know they've been trying to do that for a long time here. But this is just getting bizarre. It's out of control here. Now, there's one little piece of good news that's come on out. Apparently, Israel and Iran are engaging in what is called indirect negotiations regarding Syria, where apparently the goal is that they do not get into conflict with each other. Apparently neither, well, certainly Iran does not want an escalation of a conflict with Israel, and apparently Israel is backing off confrontation with Iran. So apparently through a third party in Jordan, they're having these negotiations to say, well, we'll stay over here and you'll stay over there and we'll stay out of each other's ways. And I think that's kind of a good thing right now. Maybe there's some common sense starting to break on out over there in the Middle East here. Up in Ukraine, Putin is issuing a warning to NATO that Ukraine is Russia's red line, and warning the Western countries not to cross that red line in relations with Moscow. Putin is saying, yes, there are certain limits that should not be crossed. Respect our interests as well. So basically, according to Putin, NATO's enlargement poses a threat to Russia. And yes, it does. NATO's moving closer and closer to the Russian border. Now, back when the Soviet Union collapsed, NATO made a promise to the new Russian republics that they were not going to expand eastward. And everything calmed down and everybody was friend and we were doing business here. and then NATO went back on their word. And Putin has a legitimate reason to be very concerned about NATO's intentions. All right, let's take a phone call. Francis in Montreal, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'd like to go out on a limb and make a prediction about a world event based on 3 historical points. The first point is that at the time the Russian Revolution broke out, Trotsky was a minor gangster in Brooklyn. He was given large sums of gold and American cash by the Rockefellers and sent to Russia to create the Red Army and overthrow the Tsar. And when they did, there was Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin. One of the first orders of business and the underlying cause of the Rockefellers financing them was to send these armed thugs that they'd hired with Trotsky's gold and Rockefeller's gold to Baku, where Russia was rising up as a major oil producer. And that was lowering the price of oil throughout the world. Yes. And the Nobel brothers were producing oil there, and they had to run for their lives. And what followed was a massacre of all the oil engineers and entrepreneurs and scientists that were there. They were all stood up against the wall and executed with firing squads. And Lenin declared a week of looting. They burned Baku and its oil fields to the ground, and they concluded by raping and murdering all the women and children of the oil engineers and entrepreneurs. And Russia was crippled in its oil production for the entire length of the USSR, which is rather paradoxical when you think the whole point of communism is to enrich the proletariat. Makes no sense unless you see it as a Rockefeller Rothschild plot to remove competition. The second point I would like to make is that several years ago, we all know this, Hugo Chavez said, "I will produce oil at $20 a barrel from now till kingdom come if you guarantee that the price won't fluctuate." This should have made everybody rejoice. Instead, Chavez was vilified as the biggest scoundrel on the planet, and immediately Venezuela was laid siege to by all the whole corporate elite of the world. And now Venezuela is crushed as people are humiliated and impoverished. And you go online and all the shills are out there just crowing with delight that the Venezuelans are reduced to beggary for the wicked crime of offering to pump oil at $20 a barrel. Okay?
Yes.
I was just reading, I stumbled over this on a journal on the weekend, Oil Price, it's called. And there's a good article from March 6th of this year. Nigeria can produce oil at $20 a barrel. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation can produce crude oil at around $20 USA a barrel. But there are plans to bring this even lower to US $15 a barrel. The company's group managing director, Mekandi Baru, told media. And Nigeria's pledged to keep its oil production at 1.8 million barrels daily after OPEC axed it. I predict that Nigeria is now in the sights of this world power of oil control price, and that but you can see there's AFRICOM, and we already are getting evidence that there's a lot of special forces activity in Africa.
Yes.
This article in the New York Times. I predict Nigeria is about to have all hell break loose on its head for having the audacity to propose this.
Yeah.
And if I could add a little appendix, if I could add one appendix to this as well.
Yeah.
During the election campaign, Donald Trump said, when we invaded Iraq, why didn't we take their oil? And this was a question that was never answered. He said, we could have paid the $5 trillion that we spent on the war in Iraq with the Iraqi oil. Why didn't that happen? Well, something did happen with Iraqi oil, but nobody's talking about it. What happened was a pipeline was built with 3 or 4 big U.S. military bases along the pipeline to Haifa. And the Israelis were selling that oil.
Yes.
Where did they sell it to? They sold it to communist China. And since the Iraqi war, communist China has been getting top-grade Iraqi oil for $15 a barrel, according to Tex Mars. The United States, through its $5 trillion war in Iraq, has been subsidizing the growth, the tremendous astronomical growth of the communist Chinese, who are murderers. They've murdered 70 million people, and they've been subsidizing the growth of their industry at the expense of Americans who have to pay, what, $168, $180 a barrel for oil?
Well, it's not quite that high yet, but it's definitely up there. But it's not the first time that Israel got a sweet deal from oil pipelines, because when the pipeline from Iran was going to that tanker terminal in Haifa, Israel was just dipping out all the oil and gas they wanted pretty much for free. And that's why they were very upset following the Iranian Revolution of 1979, because those Iranian students just shut that valve. And Israel got very angry about that.
Well, then I'm not crazy about Nigerians, but the Nigerian people are about to get it. That's my prediction.
I agree. You know, we know that the price of oil is controlled. Everybody who's hitting the roads this holiday weekend has probably already noticed the price at the pump has gone up 30, 40 cents, which happens every summer. They charge more because they know the demand is up. And anybody who threatens that profitability becomes a target. That was certainly the case with Saddam Hussein, who wanted to sell Iraq's oil for the euro. Was certainly the case with Muammar Gaddafi, who wanted to sell Libya's oil for the gold dinar. And you're right, Nigeria offering to sell oil for $15 a barrel. There's going to be some reason why those gosh darn Nigerians have to be destroyed.
Yeah, or they'll create some another ISIS, like that Boko Haram, to go and terrorize them. And at the end of the game, their oil industry will be laid waste.
Yes.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Thank you for your show, and happy Memorial Day.
All right, well, thank you very much. Have a happy Memorial Day. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the news here. Let's see. Apparently, Israel. Oh, we've got Steve Elkins on the line. Let's go ahead and grab his phone call. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? I was just looking at your email.
Yeah. I talked about that. It was a good show yesterday. You know, I had Karen Smith on my show. She's been on a lot of programs, national programs, talking about South Africa, what was going on, the white genocide in South Africa. And she threw a theory at me a couple of weeks ago on my show, in that, why is the United States silent? Why are they not doing anything to help the people in South Africa and what's going on there, the genocide? And her theory really made a lot of sense. And her theory was basically that the United States won't get involved until this thing gets out of control, basically kind of like a civil war. And then they'll come in as the peacekeepers and basically claim what they wanted all along. And there's a lot of uranium mining going on in South Africa. So, you know, keeping in mind who controls the oil controls the power in the world, who controls the uranium resources controls the nuclear power and the nuclear weapons in the world too. I think she might be onto something there. I started thinking about that a little bit. In the United States, of course, wars are for profit, for economic reasons, not democracy. And she might have a valid point here in thinking that the United States will come in, basically take over all that, stay the par. They'll go there and they'll be the liberators, and they'll, take over everything and basically claim the resources in the ground there in South Africa for themselves, and basically build an embassy and everything else, stay there. And I think she's right, because they certainly don't want China to get their hands on it, and they don't want Russia to get their hands on the uranium. So I think she has a valid theory there that we will get involved, the United States will get involved at the appropriate time and come in as the peacekeepers to basically claim the resources later on.
Okay, so let me see if I've got a good grasp on this. Hillary Clinton and her cohorts basically sell 20% of America's uranium to Russia, requiring the United States to basically plan on invading South Africa to make up that shortfall. Sounds kind of bizarre to me.
Possible.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for the phone call, Steve. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And for a holiday, it actually is a busy news day here. Anyway, Israel has launched yet another airstrike in Gaza, claiming that they're bombing Hamas positions, but apparently causing no casualties. At one point, Israel actually employed a tank to fire at what they called a military observation post, and yet the video of the event shows it's just a portion of a fence. There didn't seem to be any observation posts there, but apparently some Palestinians were killed with that one. But one of the targeted sites from the airstrikes was affiliated with the Ezzedine al-Qassam Brigades, the armed wing of resistance movement Hamas, which has governed the Gaza Strip since 2007. Well, to me, it's not a resistance movement if they're governing the place. They are the government. And apparently Israeli aircraft targeted another Hamas site in the west of Khan Yunis city in the southern Gaza Strip. So Israel is just pounding on those poor Palestinians right now. Next Tuesday, actually tomorrow, the Gaza Strip will set off a flotilla of ships in an attempt to break the 12-year-long Israeli blockade on the Palestinian territory. Now, this is all symbolic, and Israel will no doubt try and stop this, hopefully without the fatalities that we saw on the Mavi Marmara, where 10 activists were just shot dead by the IDF troops here. But apparently they're sending out these boats that are actually going to carry a number of injured Gazans and patients who are still trying to get proper medical treatment for injuries inflicted by Israel during these March for Land protests, which, by the way, are still continuing. They had one on Friday. So they're going to try and break the siege out there and get these patients to some proper medical care, because Israel won't let them go, won't even let them go to the West Bank. And as a result, many of these Palestinians who've been shot with these expanding bullets have had to have amputations. Their legs could have been saved with proper medical care at Palestinian hospitals in the West Bank, but Israel refuses to let them go. And again, you have to almost admire the Palestinians for their patience in dealing with all of this stuff. Now, in the village of Aqaba, north of the West Bank, families are calling on Palestinian human rights organizations and the government to save their homes from more Israeli demolition orders. And the Israeli authorities have recently issued orders to demolish the homes of 20 families in the village of Aqaba under the pretext of being built in Area C. What's really going on, of course, is Israel is building more of these illegal settlements. They're trying to build so many settlements in a specific pattern, so there's no more contiguous land for a future Palestinian state. Every single one of those settlements are illegal under international law. They have been roundly condemned by the General Assembly at the United Nations. They would have been condemned by the Security Council were it not for the endless series of U.S. ambassadors out there going, veto, we veto, Israel has a right to build homes wherever they want to, in our opinion. So, now, a little bit of good news. Apparently, the Israeli Attorney General is expected to recommend indictments against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on charges of receiving bribes. Now, I would like to see this guy thrown in jail. But unfortunately, in order to duck the bad press over the indictments, it means that Netanyahu is going to try and ramp things up against the Gazans, the Palestinians in general, probably Lebanon as well. So we'll see what happens there. Apparently, Great Britain has deployed what they call a Type 23 frigate. And it's heading for Britain's National Support Facility in Bahrain, which was officially opened last month by Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa and the Duke of York. And basically, this represents the largest British deployment into the Middle East in almost 50 years. But apparently this Type 23 frigate has a new missile system developed at a cost of close to £1 billion. So everybody is arming up. They all know a war is coming. What can I tell you here? Now, as we mentioned last week, Israel's top court has literally rubber-stamped Israel's use of these butterfly bullets, saying that these unarmed protesters represent part of the armed conflict between Hamas and Israel, which is rather ridiculous. Now, when we come back from these commercials, a little bit more lunacy coming from Israel's law machine. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about what's going on over in Israel, where Israel's Supreme Court has basically said it is okay for the IDF to use these butterfly bullets, these bullets that basically fold open on impact, resulting in extreme damage, if not death, because it is the view of Israel that these unarmed protesters represent a legitimate threat to Israel, and that therefore this was not a peaceful protest. I mean, they're pulling this out of thin air. Now, the other law that's just been handed down from the Knesset is even more of a giveaway, as it were. Israel has just passed a law making it a crime to take pictures or videos of Israeli soldiers doing what they do. In other words, if you see an Israeli soldier shooting little kids in the head and you take a picture of it, you go to jail, not the Israeli soldier. And journalists, of course, are condemning this law. And apparently this comes all the way down from Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. And apparently, if this law is actually passed, anybody who takes a photograph or video of an Israeli soldier at any time is facing 5 years in prison. And obviously critics are saying it attacks the profession of the press. It helps to cover up and thereby legitimize the criminal practices committed by Israel. Yes, it does. This is what Israel wants. Israel wants to go on doing what Israel is doing, but they're tired of the condemnation of the world. But they don't want to change their behavior. They just want to get rid of the condemnation. And simply screaming, you're an anti-Semite, Jew-hating Hitler lover at everybody, that's worn out. People don't fall for that anymore. We know it's a trick. We've had members of the Knesset admit it's a trick to just get us to shut up. And we're not willing to shut up anymore. Not in the face of people being shot with these horrendous types of ammunition that are actually illegal to use in war. And Israel saying that this is a war doesn't get them off the hook for using ammunition that is banned in warfare. Now, Israel's defense ministry has started the construction of an underwater barrier intended to prevent Hamas and other Islamist militant groups from launching surprise attacks into the south of the country by sea. I think Hamas and these other groups would be perfectly willing to let Israel alone if Israel would stop constantly attacking them and blockading them and starving them. I mean, that's the image of Israel the world is getting. Israel sits there with its nuclear arsenal and its U.S.-supplied weapons, constantly bombing its neighbors and saying, oh, we're under threat, we're helpless, we have to go and kill these people. No, you don't. Stop the killing. Acknowledge the Palestinian rights to existence. Just give Palestine what you demand for yourself, a recognition of your right to exist, and everything would calm down. Do you realize that the last 60 years of all of this discord comes down to a simple situation? Israel demands everybody recognize Israel's right to exist, but they refuse to grant that same right to the people of Palestine. That's it. That's the source of all of this. If Israel were to recognize a Palestinian right to exist, to have a state of their own, all the other nations in the Middle East would say, okay, we recognize Israel's right to exist. Let's put down our weapons. Let's get into some commerce here. Let's get into trade. All of that will be settled if Israel would simply grant to other countries that which it demands for itself. But no, we're going to do it Israel's way. You give us what we want, and maybe somewhere down the road, we may decide to do something nice for you. And look at all the bloodshed that has resulted from Israel's one-way demand. You recognize our right to exist. We don't have to recognize yours. Apparently, once again, settlers from the illegal settlements have attacked Palestinian olive groves. Apparently, military tractors destroyed around 1,000 olive and almond trees belonging to local farmers on the grounds that they were illegally planted on state land. That's it. That's the claim. Israel goes on in and says, oh, no. These lands you've been living on for generation after generation after generation, they don't belong to you. They belong to us, and we're going to destroy your crops. And they didn't leave anything. They just absolutely destroyed all these trees. Now, the Palestinians, like anybody else, they just want to engage in business. And exporting olives and almonds are a big part of what they do. And the olives are the hard part. It can take 10 years after planting an olive tree before it produces a saleable, usable crop. And these military tractors just destroyed it all. And apparently this was the largest uprooting operation in the southern West Bank in 3 years. The farmers say, this is our land. And Israel says, nope, it's our land now. Going to knock down the trees. We're just going to take it. It's all ours. All right, let's take a phone call here. Paul in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mr. Rivero.
Yes.
Concerning getting arrested for taking pictures of the IDF military shooting children, et cetera, does that apply to all of the IDF trained policemen here in occupied America also? In other words, if I take a picture of a IDF American policeman doing something hideous, will I go to jail? Thank you.
No, you will not. Now, the police like to claim that there are laws against taking photographs of the police out there in public, doing civil forfeitures, beating up girls in bikinis. That happened earlier today. But the courts have ruled consistently because of the First Amendment that, yeah, it is legal to photograph or video police in public behaving badly, because once the police are in public, they have no reasonable expectation of privacy. That has not, unfortunately, stopped police from tasering people who are photographing them doing something wrong, or even smashing cameras. But the response to that is to file civil litigation against the police officer, saying they had absolutely no grounds to destroy the camera, and you get the police or the police department to buy you a new camera. But no, technically, you are allowed to take pictures of the police in this country. Knesset passed laws do not apply here. Go ahead.
My question is, can I be extradited to Israel and be put in an Israel court because I took pictures of an IDF trained policeman who undoubtedly took an oath to Israel?
No.
Not yet, huh?
Not
week.
yet.
Thank you.
Who knows what's going to happen in the future, but not yet. We still have the right to take pictures of police behaving badly, and we need to do that. And we need to put it out on the internet and shame these people. And what's coming on out is apparently this stuff's been going on for a very long time, but the corporate media successfully hid it from us, and now we are acting as our own independent media, and we're showing the rest of the country just what the country is really all about, the police force included. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha, Nui.
Hey, Nui, back at y'all. When you mentioned about what Israel says and what it does and so forth, as far as the government and the military is concerned about, we can do this, but you cannot do that, or whatever the case was. And we might let you do this if you allow us to do that, or whatever the case is. When you're just, of course, you did a lot better job of describing that than I just now did. I just now butchered the blooming thing. But basically, what you described, atypically, puts me in mind of what you call the mafia.
Yes.
Which, quite frankly, is the Israeli government and the military, being the mafia, is basically manipulating the U.S. government and the U.S. military to their whims, then why don't the U.S. government and the military go on over there, since they are such in love with their captors, and go ahead and move on over there and let the people put up their own government in the D.C. District of Criminals area that used to be, and run the country the way it was supposed to be to start with?
Oh, because there's lots of loot and plunder yet to be had. And Israel is not going to be done sucking the wealth out of this country until there's nothing left to suck.
Sucking and plundering here in the U.S.?
Yes.
My gosh, what else are they going to suck? Our blood out? There's nothing left.
If they could find a use for it, yes.
There's nothing left. I mean, the infrastructure is basically turned into a pathetic waste area. I mean, and there's so many laws about, don't get me started here, but you already did. Before you know it, they'll have a law out there about when you can go to the bathroom and when you cannot go to the bathroom in your own home.
Yes.
Now, I hate to say that, because if I know people as trendy as they can get sometimes, they'll have a bathroom not only in the kitchen, not only in the living room, but also in the bathroom, while they're doing the poopy deal, while they're taking a shower. Who knows what? Yes, I know, that sounded kind of comical there. But, you know, if they want to have a TV, if not on their wrist, or the toy or whatever, then they have it hanging from the ceiling in the bathroom. I mean, why don't people just go ahead and take a shower out in the public arena and let it be done with if they want to show off their toys? You know, I just don't get it. And then to talk about people being arrested for lewd actions and all that. Well, what is more lewd?
Well, you know, here in Hawaii, we have a bit of a problem because, you know, Hawaii is promoted with lots of postcards and posters of topless hula girls and very scantily clad, if clad at all, young ladies lying on the beaches. And tourists come on out here and think that's the way that we all live. But the reality is public nudity is absolutely banned. And I think it's like a $65 ticket if you're out on the beach without the appropriate clothing. And this is a result several years ago of a campaign put forward by Hawaii's citizens who were morally outraged at the amount of skin that was being seen on the beaches. Oddly enough, all of these morally outraged citizens seem to own bathing suit and T-shirt shops, I should add. But as of right now, there are some private resorts where clothing optional rules will apply. The only public place where people can go skinny dipping is Little McKenna Beach down on Maui. It's not legal, but it's just too remote to be enforced, and that's about the only place. So, yeah, they do have rules here about what you're allowed to wear, not allowed to wear.
Well, Michael, that sounds typical because at least at one point in time, it may have changed since then, this day and time, but there are clothing optional resorts in Key West, Florida.
Yes.
Where almost anything goes, depending on what your taste is or whatever, or lack thereof.
No, there's a lot of clothing optional resorts down the coast of Mexico. And as a matter of fact, when Hawaii's state government did pass that law, closing down the clothing optional beaches in this state, there was an immediate drop in tourism because people who wanted to have clothing optional beaches said to heck with Hawaii, and they went down to Mexico.
Well, go figure. I do not make out. If people want to be that clothes optional, then do it in your own home. I mean, if you don't want to walk around in your birthday suit, go for it. But do it at home, for crying out loud. Unless you got a star-graving tin body like Bo Derek did at one time, pray tell, whatever. I mean,
well, now you're getting judgmental here, and all I can say without going into too much details is that body surfing takes on a whole different aesthetic at a clothing optional beach.
That's true.
Well, the whole point of a clothing optional beach is nobody's being judgmental. You just work on your all over tan. You get your dosage of vitamin D, and I think for the most part, bathing suits are a hideous waste of fabric. What can I tell you?
Well, that's true too. But when I was quoting about Bo Derek and all that being a 10 or whatever, that was not a judgmental comment. It was more an observational comment because back in the 80s or 90s, woohoo, that's a hot look or whatever the case is. Not everyone, well, I'll put it this way, no two women can look identical. I don't care how much is done to them cosmetically, they're not going to look anything identical at all to each other.
Well, that's true. That's true. But they're all beautiful in their own way. I mean, to my eyes, Claire's beautiful. I like looking at her when she gets out of the shower. What can I tell you?
Well, okay, TMI.
All right. We're going to let you go then. Thanks an awful lot.
Have a great one. All
right. Phone lines are open here. However did we get on this discussion? Okay. And yes, in my younger days, I was a wild child here. I even got to go skinny dipping up at Hef's place. So eat your hearts out there, guys, here. Apparently, tensions are building over in China. And the headline that came out of this article over in The Sun is a little misleading and a little sensationalist. It's saying U.S. Navy warships in serious incident with China after sailing into disputed waters. There was no real incident. They just sailed into the disputed waters. But again, it shows the ratcheting up of tensions over the South China Sea. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call now from Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. I think I hear you correctly that they decided to make the nude beaches illegal in Hawaii.
Yes.
I'll cross that Hawaii off my list now of places where I'm going to go on vacation if I ever hit the lottery and get rich, because,
no, it really did have a negative impact on the tourism numbers here, and I guess they just weren't realizing how many people came to Hawaii because they could work on their all-over tans. There are still private resorts here in Hawaii where you can go clothing optional. Overall, as far as the public beaches are concerned, all of the beaches that had been clothing optional were all shut down. And it negatively impacted our tourism.
Well, there's nude beaches in California still, aren't there? Maybe they close those down too?
I have no idea. It's been a long time since I've been in California. I know Black's Beach, San Diego. I think there's still a few. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been in California.
In every place. Europe has some, don't they?
Oh yeah, Europe has a lot of them. The Europeans are nowhere near as hung up about nudity as Americans are right now. I remember when I worked in Europe, it was like no big deal. It was just there.
Right.
I'm getting back
Mostly
to California.
topless anyway.
Yeah, a lot of topless, especially at the beaches and stuff. Getting back to California, when I did live back there, there was this place called Elysium, which was basically up there in the mountains north of Malibu. And it was a very beautiful place, very carefully kept. It's since, unfortunately, sadly, gone out of business. But that was a very nice place where you could just sort of go and just be yourself.
Well, I like that movie. I don't know if you saw the movie Hide there. It's kind of a comedy about Hawaii. Did you ever see that one?
No, I don't think I did.
This guy, it was on, I think it was on Amazon Prime for a long time. Maybe it still is, but this guy, it was a slapstick comedy. But the guy goes there to Hawaii and he's smoking dope and all this, and he does go to the nude beaches. But then he went to what's her name, the actress Roseanne. He went to Roseanne's place at the macadamia plantation.
Yeah,
and he tried to bust that place. Anyway, it's pretty funny. But yeah, I don't know. I go to the poor man's Hawaii. It's Philippines. Didn't take as much money. You have the same thing over. Of course, they don't have nudity. They're Catholics over there. They don't even like you not wearing a shirt.
Yeah, they're a little more rigid than here in Hawaii, and
right.
you know. But every once in a while, you'll see women who are briefly topless here on our beaches. Mostly, they're just getting the sand out of the top. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go, Don. We got to take a break for station identification. And we're going to be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And a reminder that the Front Sight Training Academy promotion has been extended to June 2nd. Now, that's the end of this week. So this is the last week you're going to be able to take advantage of this deal. And it is a good deal. If you go over to Front Sight Academy's website and you look at the video of their training, these are serious people. This isn't some fantasy group out there saying, "Oh, look, we're going to pretend to be soldiers." This is serious professional training. And if I were living on the mainland, anywhere around Nevada, I'd take this deal myself, absolutely, without question. So you've got the rest of this week, but as of the end of this week, it is gone. It's not going to come back again. So if you've been sitting on the fence thinking about this, now's the time to move. All right, let's take a phone call from Rowley in Minnesota. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I saw the new Deadpool movie last night. It had a release on May the 18th, 2018, and it's the sequel to the original Deadpool movie. And there's tons of hidden Easter eggs, which is like hidden messages and references and cameos in the movie. There's totaling 600 in total.
Yeah.
There's actually a portrait of Karl Marx inside the X-Mansion. That's the X-Men Academy. When Deadpool came to visit and became a trainee to become an X-Men, and he put on this dorky yellow vest with an X on, and they're standing in the stairwell.
Okay, Raleigh.
And usually they have portraits.
Raleigh?
Yep,
Raleigh?
yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't want you to give away too much of the movie and record for people who haven't seen it yet, of which I am one. That's kind of a tacky thing to do. You know, it's like going on out there and telling everybody Rosebud is the name of this sled.
I got you. Can I just finish the thought, and I'll stray away from the other points I was going to make?
All right, finish the thought.
Okay, and yeah, Mike, I'm sorry. I'll just wait for the movie to come out for everybody to see it.
Yeah, that would be a really good thing to do here because, first of all, we're not really an entertainment radio show or website. We don't really spend a lot of time on entertainment stories unless there is some political significance. So anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. So let's take a look at Korea. Now, last week, Trump was out there screaming, the meeting is off, the meeting is off, the meeting is off. North Korea said, we're still willing to talk. And as of right now, it looks like the summit between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump is back on. U.S. officials are over there in North Korea laying the groundwork for the summit, just in case it does move forward. Trump supporters are out there saying that Trump's canceling of the summit was just a bluff to force Kim Jong-un to be more agreeable. Maybe, maybe not. We do know, though, that Trump's advisors like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo were saying that the summit was a bad idea, that he shouldn't even be seen talking with Kim Jong-un, that he should just go ahead and do what he's going to do here. Now, to show you just how desperate the anti-Trumpers are, as you know, Trump is in the middle of some very delicate negotiations with China, trying to avoid a full-on trade war. And President Trump seems to be getting ready to agree to cut a little bit of slack for Chinese telecommunications firm ZTE, which is one of the world's largest handset makers. And now, because of that, more than 60 Democratic representatives are demanding an ethics investigation into President Trump's ties to China. Is there collusion with China? Why is he helping this telecommunications firm, ZTE? I mean, anything that Trump does is being seized on to scream for another investigation and another special counsel and another call for impeachment. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that Donald Trump has been tremendously disappointing to me, but he did win the election. And I wish the liberal Democrats would just sort of get used to that idea and stop behaving like spoiled children. There are so many problems going on with our country right now. And the last thing we need is a government that is so badly factionalized that they're constantly at war with each other and oblivious to what's going on out here in the heartland, or in my case, out here in the Pacific. But it does somewhat seem like the political infighting has become the top priority of the federal government. And they're just not interested in the condition of the roads, the rails, the bridges, the economy, the agriculture, manufacturing. It's all about gotchas and political fighting back and forth. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Over at CNN, there's this commentator, April Ryan. She's a member of the White House Press Corps. And you have to wonder, where's this coming from? She's being criticized for tweeting about a story that asked if the Trump administration is involved in child sex trafficking. I mean, they're pulling this stuff out of thin air. Apparently, April Ryan got this from The Root, an online magazine that showcases black news, opinions, politics, and culture. And the story in The Root simply said, is the Trump administration running a child sex trafficking ring or not? Now, I know there were a lot of allegations that surfaced around the Podestas, especially when you look at some of the artwork in John Podesta's home. You have to kind of wonder about what's going on. But, CNN has sunk to the level of, have you stopped beating your wife? Kind of questions. And I'm not surprised that CNN's ratings are low. CNN is getting fewer viewers than Nickelodeon right now. That's how bad their ratings are. And this kind of yellow journalism is not going to help. CNN needs to start doing real news, hard news. Vince Foster's murder. The truth behind TWA 800 and the Oklahoma City bombing. 9/11. The fact that Saddam never had nuclear weapons. If they don't stop the propaganda, if they don't stop the lies, they're not going to be around much longer. In fact, Alex Jones is out there saying CNN is going to change their brand. They're going to rename themselves because CNN has just become discredited. The brand is damaged, hopelessly damaged. So more and more people are starting to take a serious look at the ramifications of the Obama administration running a spy operation against their political opposition. They're already calling it Spygate. It's already worse than Watergate. And it's time for this thing to be made public. Now, obviously, Obama doesn't want it made public. The Department of Justice, the FBI are stonewalling like crazy. Hillary Clinton doesn't want it made public, but it is going public, bit by bit by bit by bit. And it's our job, you and I, as members of the independent media. You're all part of the independent media now. You're not an audience. You are involved. You are part of this process. We get this information out to people and say, this is what's going on. This is how corrupt our government has become. Now, Judicial Watch, once again, is having to sue the Department of Justice and the State Department for documents which should have been disclosed under the Freedom of Information Act. And once again, Judicial Watch files the paperwork, and the State Department and Justice say, no, we don't really think we want you to see these. So Judicial Watch has had to file a lawsuit, which ultimately will rule in their favor, but of course it uses up time and money. And then in this case, they're suing for documents related to the Uranium One scandal. And they're suing for records of communication sent to and from officials in the offices of Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, Office of the Legal Counsel, and the National Security Division from January 20th, 2009 through December 31st, 2013. The State Department is being asked to produce any records relating to the company Uranium One, including records of communication sent to and from officials in the Office of the Secretary of State, meaning Hillary Clinton, Office of the Legal Advisor, Office of the Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security Affairs, and so forth. So sooner or later, this is going to get on out there. And it needs to get out there. The American people have to confront the reality of just what our government has become. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
I wanted to talk about Trump and Peter King, but Mike, I wanted to talk about a caller you had Friday about he was a Vietnam vet, and he said it's not the soldier's fault. I have to disagree with him. It's not the soldier's fault he got sent to the war. It's the establishment's fault. But I'm sorry, if you go into a village and shoot up a bunch of people, I mean, it is your fault. You know what I mean? It's like if I play a video game or a virtual reality game and grab a gun and go into a Walmart or something and shoot up a bunch of people, it's my fault.
Yes.
You know, you can't. You got. I mean, it's called personal responsibility. You know, bullseye or full body cutout. It's called being a human being. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how hard it is to figure that out, Mike.
Well, you know, part of the Uniform Code of Military Justice does say that military people have a right to refuse illegal orders, and that is a direct result of the Nuremberg trials at the close of World War II, where the Nazis were trying to defend what they had been doing by saying they were only following their orders. And the Nuremberg tribunal concluded that no, just saying that you're following your orders does not get you off the hook for doing things that are violations of international law. And following that, the military code of most of the Western nations, including the United States, was modified to say that, yes, people in uniform do have a right to reject an illegal order. We saw that with Lieutenant Aaron Watada. And so, yeah, if a soldier goes on in and participates in something like the My Lai massacre, you're absolutely right. They have done wrong. Now, they may have been talked into it by their commanding officer. They may not have had the strength of character to say, sorry, sir, this is illegal and I'm not going to do it. But you're right, they still did something bad.
Yeah, it's called moral responsibility. I mean, if you look at Israel and the United States and Britain, I mean, it's just the Western world has this attitude where they're special. They can kill babies, children, old people in wheelchairs, or arm those jihadis to do it, right, Mike?
Yep.
Like, you know, I mean, it's like no morals. You know, and countries with no morals or decadent, and then they die sooner rather than later. Just, you know, I mean, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, if you shoot innocent people, you know, morally, you're reprehensible. I mean, I don't care what military you're with.
I'm in agreement,
you know?
obviously. Now, you know, again, to be very honest, I've never served in actual combat. During Vietnam, I had an occupational deferment. But I did see, you know, what the experience did to a lot of people that I had known, both before and after their tour of duty. Again, it was rough on the returning Vietnam veterans because they carried memories of things that they had done that they had not done. And they didn't have the idea that they'd won the war as kind of a counterpoint to try and feel good about. So it was a double whammy, and it was rough on those veterans. There's no question about it.
Mike, switching gears, Israel shows you how totalitarian you can get with taking pictures of soldiers or videos, or we're doing that here with the police. But it's not full-fledged, but it will be because it's fascistic. I mean, they just don't want you to see what they're doing. That's what it comes down to.
No, they don't want it to get out there on the internet and the independent media. But again, as I told that other caller, while the police may claim that there is a law that you cannot take their picture or video, in reality, the courts consistently rule that out in public, the police have no reasonable expectation of privacy, and you're taking pictures and videos of them misbehaving is in fact protected speech under the First Amendment.
And Mike, what do you think about Peter King making that comment where if you kneel during the flag, that's like akin to the Nazi salute, and you're a racist? I mean, my head spun around like Linda Blair on The Exorcist. I mean, how fascistic can you get? You know, I might not agree with them kneeling, but I mean, to say something like that is what these people think.
Yeah, that's pretty out there.
It's
pretty out there. And again, I can't believe this issue is still ongoing. And it's almost like it's being promoted as a distraction to give people something to argue about that doesn't really threaten the government. Now, my particular point of view is that while I vehemently disagree with much that the federal government of the United States is doing right now, I love my country and I love the American people. And when that flag is up and the anthem is playing, I will be standing. Okay? That's my opinion on that subject. Because that flag doesn't represent the government. It represents the land and the people. And that is worth showing respect to. That's my opinion, okay?
Okay, Mike, real quick, I want to talk about Trump on the wax on, wax off, it's on, it's off.
Yes.
You realize the rest of the world is basically looking at us and saying we're so unstable and we can't even get our own government to agree on anything anymore. You know, so they're moving away from us.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that, and our government does look like it's dysfunctional. And it's like I said earlier in the show, it's almost like the political infighting has become the top priority for all of these members of Congress and political parties, and to the detriment of the nation as a whole.
Internal civil war. That's it. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Stephen in Oregon. Aloha, Stephen. I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. How are you today?
Doing fine.
Yes, I wanted to talk about the moral responsibility of the troops. If my history isn't wrong, I think Truman went on the radio and said that North Korea and South Korea, this was a police action. Okay, so when the president comes on the radio and says, we're going to go fight over there, and it's a police action, all these troops that are swearing to uphold the Constitution aren't doing that. Wouldn't you agree with me?
Yes, I absolutely would. And unfortunately, I'm in agreement that a lot of these troops probably ought to be paying attention to the Constitution because presidents would use things like intervention or police action to bypass the need for a congressional vote to launch a war. Of course, now Congress has completely abandoned their constitutional responsibility for oversight and handed the White House an open-ended let's go to war card.
Yes. Well, it just seems really unconscious.
I agree. Stephen, stay on the line. I've got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today, and we're talking with Stephen in Oregon. We're talking about soldiers' morality, and obviously, as part of the basic training, the drill instructors want to convince soldiers they shouldn't think about what they're doing. They should just follow their orders blindly, and tragically, most military will do just that. And they'll come to regret it in years later. But again, the orders to commit these atrocities usually come from higher up. These are not things that occur to the rank and file soldiers, sailors, airmen, who left to themselves would just as soon sit down and stay out of the way of the flying bullets. Stephen?
Yes, and we can't forget old Congress. They swear to uphold that thing too, and obviously they haven't done that. I just wanted to say one thing. My granddad was one of the first Marines to take pictures after Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Oh, wow.
And and he taught me a little bit. I know that once he came back, he realized that the Rothschild Zionists were really, really, really the problem.
Okay.
And that's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Get on back to the news here. We're going to talk about the economic news here now. Credit cards are becoming a major problem, and this almost goes back to what I was saying at the opening of the show, where all of our holidays are just turned into marketing ploys. Yes, it's the Memorial Day sale. Get on out there. Whip out that plastic. And the problem is when people are using plastic versus cash, they tend to spend more. And that's a big reason why stores, shopping malls, banks want you to use your credit cards or debit cards. You will spend more. You will go into debt. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans who are middle class are trying to support that middle class lifestyle by going on their credit cards. Now, out of all the debt available, credit card debt is the least helpful in building a financial future. It's simply spending future earnings on consumption today. Now, if you were to pay off your credit card balances in full every month, you'd be okay, but most Americans don't. Most Americans, you're just paying that minimum payment, and as a result, there's over $1 trillion with a T in credit card debt outstanding in the United States of America. And smaller banks trying to keep up with big banks have found they need to accept credit card customers with greater risk. So there is now basically a subprime credit card problem, and to nobody's surprise, credit card delinquencies are higher than back in 2008, just before that correction. Now, seriously, if you have credit cards, you need to be working on getting those paid off. You don't need the latest and greatest patio furniture. You need to get that debt down. Because when the economy pops, and it's going to pop, those bankers are going to be coming after you and your assets. You know, you owe us money, therefore we're going to take X, Y, Z. And like I said, it's why Claire and I worked so hard to pay for our newer car. It's not really a new car, but it's a newer car in cash. There's no bank loan on it. We own it. By the way, have you seen that new trend when we were out there shopping for cars? We all know you can buy a car, you can get a car loan. You can lease a car, which is like having a car loan, only when it's over, you don't have the car. Now they have a new thing called subscriptions. And this is kind of interesting, and apparently it's become very popular. And that's where you literally enter a subscription deal with a dealership that allows you to actually change the car you're driving every once in a while. If you're driving around the city, you can get a town car. If you're going out into the mountains on the weekend, you can go down to the dealership, turn in your town car, and get an SUV. And I guess it's working. But again, once the deal is over, and these are pricey. This is like $2,000 a month. But apparently they're very popular for the people who have that kind of money. Moody's is warning of a particularly large wave of junk bond defaults coming. They're concerned about China's debt crisis and Italian bonds. Now, we know that the Italian banks have been in trouble for a very, very long time. And with their new Eurosceptic government, things may actually be getting worse because their new Eurosceptic government isn't really paying off debts to the EU at a top priority. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And boy, it's getting very cloudy out the window here. We're expecting thunder showers coming in a little bit here. Hopefully our show will be over before the lightning starts striking all over the place. Article coming out of Zero Hedge here. Why America is heading straight toward the worst debt crisis in history. Well, there's a variety of reasons. We were talking about one of them just with that previous story about credit card debt. People don't want to admit their standard of living is being forced into a decline. So they're out there using their credit cards to try and still look like they're living middle class, even though middle class America is now officially a minority. And you ought not to be doing that. The other situation, of course, is you have people who have existing debt, long-term debt, like mortgages and car loans, who have been forced to take lower-paying jobs. The high-paying jobs are all gone. And people are being forced to take jobs for considerably less wages and salaries than they earned before. And all of this goes back to private central banking itself, which by design produces more debt than money with which to pay that debt in order to enslave and entrap all of the people and the government to their will. It's designed to be that way. You're all debt slaves, and it was intended that you be debt slaves. Getting on back to the potential of a trade war with China, rather interesting and colorful story coming out of the Daily Beast. Apparently, Steve Mnuchin and Peter Navarro on this China trip literally got into a screaming match, which apparently included a great deal of profanity. And apparently this argument came during a very important stretch of trade negotiations for the White House, and it underscored the deep divisions that have developed within the president's economic team over a key pillar of the president's agenda. Now, Navarro is a hardliner on trade. Mnuchin is a representative of the free trader camp. They've been at loggerheads for weeks over negotiations with China, and the animus has grown deeper as it becomes clearer that the White House's strongest protectionist voices are losing the internal argument. And this is another indicator to me that Trump is proving to be a very weak leader. He's not in control of his White House. In fact, they're in control of him. So that's a bad situation here. Russia and Turkey have reached a deal on the Southern Stream gas pipeline. And this is putting an end to a highly contentious period in Russia-Turkish history, which in late 2015 hit rock bottom after the NATO member state shot down a Russian jet over Syria. Remember, it was a question about whether it was over the border or not. But apparently, Gazprom and the Turkish government have reached a deal on the construction of the land-based part of the Turkish Stream pipeline that will bring Russian gas to European consumers without going through Ukraine. Now, Washington, D.C. is not happy about that at all. They don't want pipelines operating anywhere that are not under control of the U.S. and the U.S. allies. They want that option of being able to shut that valve at any time. Now, here's a little bit of good news. I know we've been talking about some of these refugees and the bad things they do. This is a pleasant example of the opposite. Apparently, a Malian immigrant literally climbed up the outside of a building 4 stories to save a child dangling from a balcony in Paris. They dubbed him the Malian Spider-Man, and because of his heroics, he got to meet President Emmanuel Macron. He's being made a French citizen, and they're offering him a job in the fire brigade. So that worked out really well. And yeah, if you see the video of this guy, he's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. So good. Granted, they're not all bad. We got one good one. Story coming out of the Express in Great Britain. The European Union seems to be going into a crisis period where Italy may be the final nail in the coffin of Macron's European dream. Now, Macron has been pushing for a more federalized European Union. And he's meeting resistance from, certainly from Great Britain, which is still trying to complete Brexit. Poland, Hungary, Germany are saying, no, they don't want any more integration. And now, of course, we have this new Eurosceptic government in Italy that is saying, no, absolutely not. They don't want a federalized European Union. They're probably looking at the United States and how we're doing under our federalized system, which is to say, not very well. Apparently, Brussels is also getting ready to express their ire if the new Eurosceptic Italian government starts to do business with Russia. And apparently, they're considering new agreements with Russia, trade agreements. And Brussels will immediately try and find some way to chastise Italy because you're not supposed to be friends with Russia. Russia are the bad people. You know, you don't go make friends with people like Russia. I think Italy is saying, you know, we're all grown-ups here. And we're going to decide for ourselves who our friends are, who our enemies are here. Now, I want to talk about this very bizarre case coming out of Great Britain involving a gentleman named Tommy Robinson. And it's a bizarre situation. He's independent media journalist, and apparently he was arrested for taking video outside a courtroom where these refugee members who were guilty of a child sex grooming gang were being tried. And apparently in Great Britain, they don't want attention paid to the problems caused by the refugees. So they arrested this guy, Tommy Robinson. They literally gave his personal lawyer misleading directions. So they saddled him with a totally useless court-appointed attorney. And he was immediately tried and sentenced to 13 months behind bars, and he's been sent to Hull prison. And this has triggered global outrage here, because in Britain, rapists enjoy the right to a full and fair trial, the right to legal representation of their choice, the right to have sufficient time to prepare their cases, and the right to go home on bail between sessions of their trial. None of this was offered to Tommy Robinson. They just grabbed him and threw him in prison, and it's created outrage around the world. Now, over in Germany, a German member of their parliament is saying it's obvious Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. His life is in clear and pressing danger. And Germany is now offering Tommy Robinson political asylum. If Tommy can get out of jail, get on an airplane. But again, you have the government was literally trying to suppress the story that some of these refugees coming into the country were engaged in child sex grooming operations, grooming children to be used as sex slaves and child prostitutes. But we can't talk about that. George Soros wouldn't like it. So, also over in Germany, there's been a massive protest. Some 30,000 protesters are in the streets of Germany over the migration issue. And basically, they're protesting against Angela Merkel's open door policy. And most of the protests took place in Berlin. 25,000 people there. A lot of people from the Alternative for Germany party. So this is really beginning the pushback. So apparently there's yet another protest where the protesters are screaming and shouting abuse outside this court as a gang of 27 men and 2 women are accused of a string of sex crimes against children. And so it's a total of 29 people. And prosecutor Richard Wright told the court the defendants have been split into 3 groups, which are set to face 3 different trials early next year. So it's an issue. These refugees have caused all kinds of problems. And then there's that secondary issue. I just can't understand how anybody could even think of doing that sort of thing with a child. And maybe it's because I'm a frustrated daddy. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be a father. That didn't work out. But Claire and I are the world's greatest auntie and uncle. But just this idea that people would even find children to be sexually attractive, to me, that's bad wiring. And I'm an easygoing, loosey-goosey kind of guy. You know, I'm not a prude, as I indicated earlier in the show. But when it comes to children, I have some very primal paternal instincts that kick on in. And I'm absolutely not ashamed to say that either. You don't do that to kids. Kids are for teaching, encouraging, enlightening, raising, protecting, feeding. Give them art supplies, musical instruments, telescopes. That's what children are for. Not that other stuff. I think it's a little sick. I'll tell you what also strikes me as sick. I saw this article the other day where apparently, you've probably already heard about all these sex robots that are out there. Apparently, one of these sex robot companies is making child sex robots, and I think that's a little over the line for myself. Anyway, down in Mexico, apparently the violence between some of these drug cartels are ramping up, where rival cells of the Cartel de Noreste, or Northeast Cartel, and the Zetas Vieja Escuela escalated over the weekend. And apparently these cartel gunmen dumped the bodies of 6 women into a ravine. And 2 of the victims had been pregnant. So remind me again, why is the U.S. government sending firearms down to these people? Over in Germany, the head of the Bavarian Interior Ministry, Markus Söder, has said that Germany should start sending potential asylum seekers back to their borders if the new refugee center advocated by federal authorities does not work as planned. Germany does not want to just put these people out on the street. They've been a source of all kinds of problems. They're really tired of it. So they're building a refugee center. But when it becomes full, what do? Just send them back to the border. They should have been doing that all along. You know, Soros wants open borders. I mean, I wonder how many of these refugees he has allowed to live on his property, which if you hunt it down in Google Earth, there's a lot of room there. He could fit a lot of people, a lot of refugees onto that property. I'll bet you there aren't any. The United States Office of Refugee Resettlement has apparently lost track of some 1,500 immigrant children previously settled with a sponsor. But according to a top immigration official, well, that's not really our problem. You know, we don't care. So apparently the Department of Homeland Security hands over these unaccompanied and undocumented children caught on the U.S.-Mexico border, 40,000 during the 2017 fiscal year. And the Office of Refugee Resettlement settles undocumented children with a sponsor, ordinarily a parent or a close relative if available. In many cases, a sponsor is someone unknown to the child. Now, the Office of Refugee Resettlement is supposed to check on the sponsored child after a 30-day period, but apparently that system broke down. And they've now lost track of 1,500 of these children. Well, they were here just a minute ago. I have no idea what happened to them. Okay, story from Freedom Outpost. Apparently, some new emails have been leaked from the Obama White House showing that in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, that they were literally pushing for the media to resort to emotional propaganda to push for gun control, to dramatize it, to tragedize it, to just say, oh, it's so horrible, push that shock value, see what happened, we have to take the guns. It was not a balanced, unbiased discussion. It was an emotional appeal to disarm the American people. Contrast that with Iceland, which is a gun-loving country. Now, when you go and buy a gun there, you get a mandatory 4-hour lecture on how to use the gun correctly. And everybody has a gun in Iceland. There have been no shooting murders since 2007. Contrast that with cities that are held aloft as the bastion of gun control in this country, like Chicago and Baltimore, where there are murders happening every single day because the criminals have guns and the law-abiding citizens do not. Here you have Iceland. Everybody is armed. No shooting murders since 2007. That's a little factoid that you Second Amendment supporters ought to hang on to the next time you're dealing with a liberal gun grabber. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And there's been a follow-up story to the headline about how 1,500 children have simply fallen off the radar over at the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and their rather casual, lackadaisical attitude about it. Apparently, these children, and I use the word children loosely because they're young adults, they have intentionally gone off-grid in order to avoid the risk of being deported somewhere down the road. And that would also explain why the Office of Refugee Resettlement isn't all that concerned about tracking down where these people went. Apparently over in Italy, there's been a little bit of a hiccup to their new Eurosceptic coalition government, and apparently the the president has appointed a pro-EU interim prime minister. And so he's basically trying to find a way to block the machinations of the Eurosceptic government. Okay, remember Chelsea Manning? Chelsea Manning apparently is not doing very well. Very little support for his Maryland Senate run. And apparently because of the stresses involved with being transgender, basically went on Twitter over the weekend to threaten suicide and drew a picture of herself on the ledge of a tall building. Now, there was actually a research project done that went on out to people who'd gone through gender reassignment surgery as to how they did afterwards, and found, rather surprisingly, that the majority of them had regrets that the gender reassignment hadn't really solved their emotional problems. And to nobody's surprise in this politically correct world, that research study was basically suppressed. Because everybody knows that when you get the knife down there, that you're going to be happy and wonderful. And you can use the other bathroom here. Now, Netflix has signed the Obamas to a multi-year contract to produce what are going to be agenda-driven propaganda movies. And Netflix users aren't too happy about that. In fact, a lot of Netflix users are canceling their memberships. And they're saying it's time for a boycott, because Netflix is supposed to be about entertainment, not just another version of corporate media dishing out propaganda to us all. Okay, there's the music. We're going to take a station identification. When we come on back, the lovely Lady Claire will be with us. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting to my side here is the lovely Lady Claire. And normally she would be with us on Fridays, but she's joining us here on Memorial Day because she will not be able to be with us this coming Friday. So you're getting a double dose of Lady Claire here on the holiday. All right, so Lady Claire, what do you want to talk about?
Well, first of all, oops,
would probably help if I turned your volume
yeah,
up.
that would probably help, dear.
Oh yeah, sure. Do it the easy way.
I want to wish all of our veterans and all of our current serving and their families a very good Memorial Day, because families do serve. It's a different kind of service when the partner is off on long deployment. So I kind of wanted that to be said. And bopping over to Europe and Syria, the European Union has decided to extend sanctions against Syria by 1 year until June 1st, 2019. And they are talking about the ongoing repression of the civilian population. Hello, please. I mean, come on. The wars that have come up in this country have been funded, they have been supported by U.S. and EU forces.
Yes.
It hasn't been an indigenous uprising in Syria. In fact, the last election that the Syrians held, Bashar al-Assad was overwhelmingly reelected.
True.
And I was a little dismayed, Mike. This came out of Sputnik. Usually they don't get the situation so wrong. It's normally better than this in its fact-finding. I found it kind of dismaying and appalling.
Well, I think basically Sputnik is simply reporting on the fact that the EU is extending their sanctions for another year.
Yeah.
And of course, all sanctions are going to do is make life for the Syrian people that much harder. And so it's kind of ironic that they would justify this action by saying, well, we've got to deal with the repression of the Syrian people.
Yeah.
At the same time, they're going to increase hardship on those Syrian people.
Yes, I agree. And we have an interesting case in France where they have arrested 2 intelligence officers on charges of spying for, wait for it, China. Insert ominous music here. They were captured and charged in December. However, their arrests were not publicized at the time because French counterintelligence officials wanted to avoid alerting more members of a possible spy ring, which some say might include up to 5 French citizens. It was only last Friday, a day after French media published leaked reports of the arrest, that the French government spoke publicly about the case. And they are being accused of 2 extremely serious acts of treason against the French state. And they have been charged with delivering classified information to a foreign power. That's pretty intense, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you think this actually happened, or do you think this is just more European demonization of China ahead of, well, let's say, a potential Big Bang against it?
Well, at this point, I'm pretty sure that the espionage is up across the board. As everybody understands, we're already in World War III. Let's be honest, we're already in World War III, and it's going to get worse. And so, yeah, I imagine that many nations are trying to cultivate espionage networks, not just in France, in Great Britain, certainly here in the United States of America.
Right.
We know that Israel is constantly spying on the American people. The largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered in the United States was uncovered just a month before 9/11 happened, operating on behalf of Israel.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me much. And you're right. I think it is going to get more intense as time goes forward and as we head into fall.
Yep.
This kind of surprised me on the part of Egypt's El-Sisi. The convoy of Miles of Smiles is getting ready to visit Gaza Strip next week after securing dates of entry through the Rafah crossing under the agreement of the Egyptian authorities. And apparently there is full coordination with Egyptian authorities on everything related to the convoy. And this is a statement by Assam Youssef, the coordinator of the campaign, during an interview with Quds Press. Quds, by the way, is the Arabic name for Jerusalem.
Yes.
He said that activists from Britain, Belgium, Germany, Algeria, Jordan, Indonesia, and Kuwait will be participating in this convoy. It's going to be carrying food and medical aid and is fully secured by Egypt and ready to be transported. It also carries in-kind aid, which will be delivered directly to the beneficiaries in the Gaza Strip. Now, it's got about 18,000 food packages and medical aids, including medicines and necessary medical supplies offered in support of some hospitals.
Well, they definitely need it after that Israeli massacre. The hospitals are just absolutely empty of needed supplies. And I'm glad El-Sisi is doing this, and I think, like so many other people, he's just disgusted and appalled by what Israel has done. Israel's absolute lack of remorse or regret for any of this. And we do know that he opened up that border crossing for the month of Ramadan, and it's great that he's allowing the convoy to get through. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And what's the next thing that you want to share with us?
Well, I wanted to go back to this article, and I wanted to say something about a bill currently floating through the Knesset. The delegation will visit a large number of inmates and pay their debts. They will also visit the victims of the Great March of Return, either in hospitals, or in their homes, provide medical assistance to them, and repair a number of poor people's houses. The delegation, which comes from the framework of the campaign Devote Your Ramadan to Gaza, Palestine, will arrive next Saturday and spend an entire week in the Gaza Strip. Al-Barakah Charitable Association, Algerian Humanitarian, Turkish GDD Association, and the Palestine Relief and Development Fund in Britain, and Turkey's Medex Association, in addition to other charitable organizations, will take part in this campaign in its 34th year. I think that is really incredible.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm glad El-Sisi is allowing it to get on in there.
Mm-hmm.
Those people in Gaza, they definitely need the food, the medical supplies.
Yeah.
Israel's brand is already damaged from the massacres.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're not showing any signs of letting up. They're still moving forward with demolitions of homes, destruction of olive groves. They may try and interfere with this. No doubt they're going to try and interfere with the Gaza flotilla, which is getting ready to, not just the flotilla coming in, but apparently Gazans are going to try and sail a massive flotilla of boats out in order to get some of the wounded Palestinians from the massacre to medical care facilities.
Yeah.
So we'll see what Israel's going to do, but everything that Israel does is only making it look worse in the eyes of the world.
Yeah.
And you reach a point where simply screaming you're just being an anti-Semite is not going to work anymore.
Stopped working. And the other thing, in terms of the massacre in Gaza, many Palestinians have lost their fear of demonstration.
Yes.
That is something that the Israelis didn't want to happen. And I have a note for Israel's Minister of Defense, Avigdor Lieberman. This new law that is being thought of to be passed by the Israeli Knesset about it becoming a crime, it becoming criminalized to video or otherwise film the IDF when they are shooting at Palestinian protesters. Well, their Supreme Court just gave him a wonderful win last week. They told the IDF that it is perfectly fine to be shooting and killing Palestinian protesters, whether or not they are throwing rocks or just yelling. So if the Supreme Court is allowing this, why does Lieberman think that this law is a good thing? Because the Supreme Court has just protected the IDF's behavior in and around Gaza.
It's not just the idea that IDF can shoot the Palestinians. It's that the Israeli Supreme Court said it's okay to use this expanding ammunition, the butterfly bullet. And it doesn't matter, what Israel's high court says. The rest of the world finds this appalling.
Yeah.
And Israel understands they have a public relations nightmare on their hands. And the only way they can shut it down is to cut off the flow of negative information coming out of Gaza and the West Bank to the rest of the world. And this is one step that they're trying to do it, along with trying to attack all of the independent media in the West who carry these photos and videos that are coming out of Gaza and the West Bank.
And will continue to do so, by the way.
Yes.
There was a very interesting article about Russia unveiling a new weapon equipped with a Predator gun and electrified shield. And apparently Russia is testing out an ammo backpack for a giant gun called the Scorpio, developed by Front Tactical Systems. And apparently the Russian military have been asking for a method of increasing effective machine gun fire and efficiency. And purpose, citing in the Firearm blog, the setup is straight out of Predator and is similar to a backpack-fed machine gun rigged by U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Vincent Witkowski in 2011 during a 2.5-hour firefight in Afghanistan. It's about 4 feet long and fires 7.62 by 54 millimeter ammo at 600 to 800 RPMs.
That's a lot of fire rate.
Yeah, and if you could see this image, it's amazing. And I have to wonder if the U.S. military has something like that when it was an American military member who kind of introduced it or improvised it in the first place.
Well, again, as you say, they had that minigun with the backpack ammo supply that was used in the movie Predator.
Right.
It's also a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And generally, I imagine this is going to look really good. I don't know how practical it's going to be. I think it would probably be more practical if it was mounted on some kind of a vehicle.
Yeah.
But we'll just see what happens. But yeah, 800 rounds per minute, that's pretty intense
That
stuff.
is intense.
Yep.
And it also has an electrified shield with it, which can prevent in allegedly non-lethal use. And one version has a built-in shocker which allows the shield to be carried and operated with one hand, as just described. The other version has a detachable shocker, which allows the officer to grip the shield with both hands and detach and use the shocker like a stun gun or electric prod when needed. And these shields are expected to have a self-extinguishing coating as well as protect law officers from Molotov cocktails. Now, I want to back up at that. Why in the name of heaven would law enforcement officials want to use this kind of a gun?
Well, they're obviously anticipating,
Yikes.
you know, public discord.
Yeah.
That's where you get things like Molotov cocktails. But they're obviously preparing for massive riots and civil disobedience.
Yeah. That's scary. And folks, we want to say again, anyone who is out there advocating violence is probably one of the alphabet soup informants, okay?
Yep.
The one thing that this government in the United States understands how to do is to put down violence like this with extreme prejudice. So just don't, okay? Just don't. And, I noticed that you are looking at the Fox feed.
Yeah.
What's going on with the volcano?
Well, the volcano is still volcanoing. Apparently, lava has now engulfed one of the sealed wellheads. No explosion.
Yet.
That was, well, I think probably there was an explosion, but the lava contained it. And they are concerned now. There had been hope that the lava wasn't going to reach the power station, but now they're saying the lava is moving again, and they're probably going to lose that power station. I'm sure they'll rebuild it just further down the slope.
Yeah.
Because it does generate 25% of the Big Island's electricity
Scary.
for relatively little cost.
Yeah.
They're just taking advantage of the heat.
Yeah.
And, you know, and apparently it worked very, very well. Anyway, what have we got here?
The next thing I would like to comment on, and I know that you've covered it a little bit, but the terrifying case of Tommy Robinson in the UK. This was an appalling breach of justice.
Yes.
From the country that gave the world the concept, the high concept of the Magna Carta. Not that people ever actually observed the Magna Carta.
No.
Not technically.
No. King John didn't, and the nobility didn't. It looked really good. It sounded really good, but they didn't stick with it. And
this thing about Robinson, there has been a D-notice for the British press to ignore it, to not report on it. However, that does not occur here in the United States, and I think we need to have a small segment of our program dedicated to updates on Tommy Robinson, what's going on with his case.
Yeah, we're going to be paying attention to that because
very much.
This guy got just railroaded into jail as quickly as they could.
Yeah.
They arrested him, and again, the only thing that he did was he was documenting outside this courtroom where this predominantly Muslim child grooming gang were going on trial. But because the globalists don't want the nations of Europe to really understand what all this open border refugee issue has done to their country, is doing to their country, they want it kept silenced. There are some countries in Europe that have literally passed laws saying that if a refugee commits a crime, you can report on the crime, but you're not allowed to say that the perpetrator is a refugee or mention their ethnicity.
Yeah. And in doing so, I would say that Prime Minister Theresa May of the UK has morphed into Chancellor Susan from the film V for Vendetta, where everything was to be oppressed, covered up. And now, I don't advocate violence. People who listen to the show and who watch and read what I post, I don't advocate violence. But in the end of the film, thousands of Britons simply stood up to the police, and the police were given orders to back down, if I remember the ending.
Well, that's because the chancellor was not in the chain of command by that point in the film.
Right, right.
The cops didn't want to take it upon themselves to do that.
No. But there will be updates on this guy's case from the website and from our radio shows, so be sure to look out for that.
Yep.
Okay, and the next story is, and it's related. A California man pleads no contest to the rape of a 5-year-old sentenced to 90 days of house arrest.
90 days of house arrest?
Yeah, I'm not kidding you. California has collectively lost its mind when it comes to its judiciary system. Now, in my world, any rape, and particularly the rape of a child, is one of the most heinous things that a human being can do to another human being. But apparently the guy is very wealthy. I don't know if he bought off the judge. I don't know who or what he bought off. But he bought off somebody. And, 90 days of house arrest, no problem, no charge. What is wrong with a society that does not punish this kind of behavior?
I agree.
Yikes.
This is sick.
And also, he doesn't have to register as a sex offender. And
well, you're right. Somebody somewhere got bought.
Yeah. And it's the law people around him have just gathered ranks. Very wealthy guy, and just an example of how the wealthy people, time and time again, escape the penalty for what they have done, said the investigator on the case, Meliko. And he is the founder of an automotive parts manufacturer, Rare Parts, Inc., and he was a friend of the girl's family, and this is where it gets really awful for me. They trusted the guy, and he took advantage of them. And it happened when the family was invited over to Burgess Calaveras County cabin back in 2016. And the investigating officer said, the little girl is doing very badly. She's now 7. She's showing all the symptoms of someone who's been molested.
Okay, we got to take a break here for commercials.
All right.
And we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And for those of you who are willing and able to support Republic Broadcasting, the reality is dire. Without your help, Republic Broadcasting goes away. It's that simple. So the postal address to send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, and for all other times, it's extension 3. So getting on back to the news then, I noticed when we were looking at that last story about this guy who raped a 5-year-old and got 90 days house arrest for it. There was another story in there. I'd seen it happen before where somebody was making homemade child porn and he put a copyright on it, which strikes me as, a good way to have the police knocking on your door. But
knocking down your door.
Knocking down your door. Yeah. They're not only seriously sick, but seriously stupid at the same time.
Yeah.
We actually have a caller waiting on the line. Let's take a phone call from Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I would like to speak about Tommy Harrison. What's his name?
Robinson.
Tommy Robertson. Yes, sir. Yes, sir and ma'am. And happy Memorial Day to you.
And to you.
I think there's a lot that's not being said about it. Actually, the Pakistani grooming, rape, and drug gangs who are putting a lot of the young British girls into selling them into prostitution and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
This was brought to the attention by a Pakistani lawmaker who saw it as an affront to Islam, that these gangs were allowed to do this. But the trade-off and what people are going to find, this is really why they're being quiet and shutting it down. The trade-off is the core of the British officials, the top officials, not all of them, but a lot of them. I'm talking about the Jimmy Saviles, the Edward Heaths, and many more. They get to practice the core of their religion. They get the fall off from these young children, which is pedophilia. So they are willing to let the Pakistani rape gangs, grooming rape gangs, be the scapegoat of it all, as long as they get to practice the core of their religion, which is pedophilia, which you will find, and I've heard Mr. Rivera say it before, BBC stands for the British Burgering Children. And what a lot of people fail to look at is that this is the core of their religion. I'm talking about the ones who take oaths and become high-powered politicians over there. You're sworn into certain secret gangs, certain secret societies.
I've heard that.
Core of their religion.
I've heard that, Lenny, a number of times, and every time someone has gotten even close to it, all of a sudden the case goes away. And so I would tend to believe that you are very correct in that assessment, because this is not the first time this has happened.
I mean, look how they buried the Franklin scandal.
In the U.S., yes.
Exactly. And let's look at this. Let's look at this 92-year-old rich gentleman. What are the chances that he knows some rich judges? What are the chances this judge knows some people who let this little girl off you guys were just talking about? This is a religion, okay, that a lot of people are into. And some would say it goes on even in Hollywood at some of the, I wouldn't say highest level, but the lowest level.
You're right, it does. You know, we've had like Corey Feldman has come on out and gone public about it. And it's a very disturbing portrait of human nature, that there are people who think such behavior is acceptable, or maybe they do it because it isn't acceptable, and they're just hooked on the thrill of getting away with doing something
with impunity
that so many people would find aberrant. But again, like I said, in my universe, this is not appropriate behavior toward children, and I get very angry about it. But yes, it is in fact going on. We know it was going on with the Franklin scandal. We know that there was something that was trying to surface in Washington, D.C.
Pizzagate, wasn't it?
Yeah,
yes.
Pizzagate.
Yes.
But that one got spun to the point where I thought we weren't getting accurate information. But yeah, it's definitely out there. And we know that the clergy are up to their neck in this. I mean, they just had all 35 of the bishops in, was it Chile?
Yes.
Yeah, all 35 Catholic bishops in Chile just resigned en masse because of their pedophilia scandal. Anyway, Lenny, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to Claire's talking points, we were just watching on the Fox News feed where Poland is now requesting U.S. troops be stationed in Poland as a deterrent to Russian aggression. Insert ominous music here.
What the heck is going on, Michael?
It's a new Cold War.
Yeah.
And just like the old Cold War, it's about keeping the American people scared so that they will pour their money and their children into the war machine.
No. Russia hasn't really done anything to deserve this kind of fear-mongering.
They haven't. I mean, anybody who's paying attention to what's going on, has been going on for the last 18 years.
Yeah.
It is the United States and Israel that are the aggressors in all of these conflicts.
Yeah, that's...
And, they keep coming up with lies about, oh, Iraq's got nuclear weapons. They're going to, Assad's got gas. He's got this and that. And lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And I don't know about you, but I'm really sick and tired of all the lies. And I'm sick and tired of all the wars.
I am too. Speaking of war, we all know what we did right before the lead up to our nice little 3-day vacation with Memorial Day today. And right before they left for their little holiday, Congress directs immediate weaponization of space to counter missile strikes.
Oh, they're bringing back the Strategic Defense Initiative.
But it gets worse. Okay. Congress is ordering the Pentagon to immediately begin construction of space-based missile interceptors to counter increasing threats from North Korea, Iran, and other countries with advanced missile technology, according to new legislation viewed by the Washington Free Beacon. And the Space-Based Interceptor Program, a plan for the U.S. to deploy satellites into space capable of destroying ballistic missiles before they even take flight, has been on ice due to repeated delays by the Pentagon. Well, the Congress has decided it's going to do something about that, particularly Senator Ted Cruz, Republican, Texas, and a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, to push new legislation measure to cut through the red tape and order the Pentagon to immediately begin construction of the Advanced Missile Defense System. Mike, you're former NASA. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, my concern is, first of all, this is a relaunch of Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, which cost a huge amount of money. It took the United States from being the world's largest creditor nation to the world's largest debtor nation in just 12 years. And they never really produced anything that was that workable. And I know that because, believe it or not, our little Hollywood visual effects company was contracted by one of the prime contractors for some illustration animation. So we actually got to see a lot of this stuff up close and personal, and it was just a huge amount of money. My primary concern is with space-based weaponry is this. Here on Earth, if you shoot a missile or an airplane out of the sky, the parts all fall to the ground, and that's the end of it. If you are in orbit around the Earth and you destroy something else, much of that is going to just go into different orbits.
Yeah.
And they're going to be pieces that are too small to track.
Space junk.
Space junk.
Space junk, yeah.
Space shrapnel is basically what it's going to come out to.
Yeah.
And it's going to damage other spacecraft, destroying them and creating more space shrapnel. And a prolonged war in Earth orbit could result in there being so much shrapnel out there that we're literally going to become trapped on planet Earth. It will be impossible to get any kind of a spaceship, let alone a manned one, out there into space without a very heavy risk of a collision. And there have been collisions already. There was one time when the space shuttle took a chip in one of the cockpit windscreens from what turned out to be just a fleck of paint. And there was one documented collision between satellites. So it's very crowded up there. And just starting to shoot objects around up there is going to be a problem. Now, I know that what they're talking about here is a system that will destroy ballistic missiles on the launch pad, which could be considered an act of war by the owners of those missiles. But again, it's going to be much easier to track those missiles and target them against the blackness of space than against the warm Earth. So they may change that. But again, this is a relaunch of Reagan's Star Wars, and it's just more money. More money spent just in case we need it on systems that, to judge by the Zumwalt stealth destroyer and the Gerald R. Ford and the F-35, are just going to be very costly pieces of junk.
And I've got an idea on this. rather than more weapons of war, what about weapons of hard-won, logical, rational negotiations with which the U.S. could get its geopolitical differences resolved? This whole initiative seems to be missing that point, and Mike, it's so poorly, terribly addressed right now.
Well, see, what the U.S. government's agenda is something other countries are actively striving to get away from. The U.S. government wants the rest of the world back to using the U.S. dollar for all international trade and banking, which the U.S. makes money off of in interest, or, you know, trade deals where we give them boxes of ink and paper and they give us cars and stuff like that. These other countries don't want to do that.
Nope.
They're actively moving away from the U.S. dollar. So there's no amount of negotiation that is going to bring the world back under the hegemonic domination of the U.S. dollar, and that is why, one of the reasons why the U.S. is pushing for war. They basically want to take the world back to the immediate post-World War II years and Bretton Woods, where the U.S. basically dominated the globe, and that's what they're after. And they're out there just spending all this money that they don't have, building up huge debt, and again, two ways in which the current U.S. situation mirrors that both of the former Soviet Union and the Roman Empire is this massive overspending on military. Which is bankrupting the nation. And you look at how much money this government is just outright misplaced. $21 trillion. They've just lost and misplaced. If they could find it, they could actually pay off much of the national debt.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's just gone. They don't know where it went. You know, golly gee shuckies, it was here a minute ago. You know.
Yes.
You know, have you looked inside the desk drawer yet? No, it's not there.
Wanted to bop over to South America. Apparently, sanctions on Venezuela are going to remain even after American prisoners are released. And Vice President Pence said sanctions will remain on Venezuela despite the release of a U.S. prisoner and his wife on Saturday. Joshua Holt and his Venezuelan wife, Thami, arrived in the U.S. accompanied by Senator Bob Corker, who helped to negotiate their release. Mr. Holt and his wife had been imprisoned in Venezuela for 2 years on charges of concealing weapons. And Mr. Pence tweeted, "Very glad that Josh Holt is now back with his family where he has always belonged. Sanctions continue until democracy returns to Venezuela." And
I have a comment about that.
Yes.
First of all, Venezuela is a democracy. The problem with Mike Pence is they don't like the guy who won the election.
No, they don't.
And anytime they start talking about restoring democracy, it's a code word for we're going to go on in there, we're going to blow up a lot of important stuff, we're going to kick out the existing government and put in somebody that we like, who will be obedient. Who will sell Venezuela's oil only for the U.S. dollar.
Well, the Venezuelan people are pretty doggone independent-minded. And if they made the choice of Maduro, that is who they voted for. And I think the presidential term is 6 years in Venezuela.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And I've got to say, this is a pretty doggone cruddy way to thank the president of Venezuela for a prisoner release. One would think that there would be something at least symbolic, Mike, but oh no.
Nope. Venezuela is definitely on the to-be-invaded list. And again, this is the U.S. foreign policy, no diplomacy, no negotiation. They're running foreign policy like mafia enforces. You know, it's a nice country you got down there. Be a shame if something bad happened to it. So you got to do what we tell you to do, right? Right.
Well, what I have noticed is that Maduro and Putin have developed a way of selling Venezuela's oil and cryptocurrency to Russia, thereby getting completely outside the U.S. sanctions on Venezuelan oil.
Really? I didn't realize that Russia was buying Venezuelan oil. I know that Venezuela offered, I think it was India, a 30% discount on the oil to use Venezuela's cryptocurrency. So now Russia's doing, wave of the future, what can I tell you?
Getting on to the Middle East, and this is this is a very sad moment. Pro-Saudi forces have seized a district and pushed closer to key North Yemen port. They have seized the Al-Durehami district on Sunday in the latest of a series of districts taken in an offensive whose ultimate goal is to capture the port city of Hodeidah. Hodeidah is the lone port city now for rebel Houthi movement and subsequently the only sea route for humanitarian aid for millions of people. And dozens were killed in the last day of fighting in Durehami, with pro-Saudi officials claiming 150 or more have been killed in the past 4 days. The Houthi-aligned fighters ultimately were forced to flee and reportedly left a number of weapons behind. Apparently, this offensive against Hodeidah is intended to end a protracted stalemate in the Saudi invasion, where little of note has changed hands in months. The fall of Hodeidah would be disastrous for the Houthis and for civilians, with human rights groups predicting massive starvation if the port falls.
Yes.
Because there'll be no more humanitarian deliveries. So apparently the Saudi goal of starving the Yemeni people into submission appears to be one step closer. And the U.S. government and military are enabling these war crimes. I'm going to say that again, folks. Enabling these war crimes in Yemen. And one has to wonder, where has the boy been? The B.O.Y., Butcher of Yemen, a.k.a. Prince Salman? World press has seen very little of him lately.
They haven't seen any of them.
Yeah.
Now, Riyadh did issue a statement in his name just yesterday.
Yeah.
But everybody is saying, rumors are flying.
Yeah.
There was an attempted palace coup back in April.
Yeah.
And the reports were that Mohammed bin Salman was shot twice. And they're wondering, is he still in hospital? Did he die? So, a lot of people are wondering what's going on there.
One has to wonder if there has been a cuckoo against him. And there have been pictures put out. But I have to wonder if the date stamps on most of the current images the House of Saud has been releasing these days are older images.
Well, they could be, and we could check the EXIF data if it hasn't been erased.
Yeah, that would be interesting to do. And another article, again, coming to us from Global Research, a Canadian blog that is, I consider, usually very spot on and very reliable. And one of the articles today said that for the past 3 years, the U.S. has attempted to disguise, manipulate, or outright deny its involvement in Yemen. And nonetheless, new facts are coming to light every so often that indicate that Washington's participation in the Saudi-led war is much more hands-on than officials will say. And recently, we've had news about Green Berets deployed along the Saudi border. And this highlights the ever-growing U.S. role in this war.
Well, this was a U.S. war from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, the U.S. is using Saudi Arabia as a proxy because the American people are just sick and tired of wars. Now, there was a, pardon the expression, successful intervention in Yemen some years back, where the legitimate government was kicked out and the U.S. installed a puppet regime. But the people of Yemen didn't like living under a puppet regime, and so they kicked out the puppet ruler and tried to reestablish their own domestic government. And that's when the U.S. said to Saudi Arabia, go on in there and whip those people into line. Because once you are a vassal state of the United States, you stay a vassal state of the United States. You learn to love your puppet rulers. And it's disingenuous to describe the Houthi as rebels because basically these are the people of Yemen trying to take back their country. From foreign rule. And that's really what's going on there.
And one of the things you have to remember, Mike, and this was brokered, I believe, by the United Arab Council, when the Yemenite people last time had a chance to vote for president, how many names were on the ballot?
One.
Al-Hadiz.
Yep.
Is this any kind of democracy that the United States should be supporting? I mean, come on, boys and girls. No, not at all. And apparently news has emerged last week that Green Berets are stationed along the Saudi-Yemeni border to assist Saudi troops. Now, there was a report from the New York Times saying that 12 commandos arrived back in December. And they received the information from American officials and European diplomats who claimed the Green Berets' only mission was to destroy weapons caches belonging to Yemeni forces. But the timing coincided with a high-profile, long-range missile launched by Yemeni forces targeting Riyadh in response to the ongoing airstrikes. Now, the missile launch in question took place in early November. It's the same missile launch that U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, used fragments of to suggest a U.S. war against Iran. The Times sources said that the Green Berets have not and will not participate in direct combat with Yemeni forces. Ansarullah, aka the Houthi troops known as Yemen's army in popular committees, have not shared any photos or reports indicating direct combat either. And at this point, the no direct combat claim seems to claim, but with
seems to stand.
Pardon?
Seems to stand.
Yes. And the UN is stating that another 10 million Yemenis are at the risk of starving to death by year's end, particularly with this Saudi forces and force-centric overcoming of that other Yemeni port.
Yeah, it's going to be a dire situation there. And again, yeah, collective punishment of the civilian population is a war crime.
Yeah.
And Saudi Arabia is engaged in it, aided and abetted by the U.S. government. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our Memorial Day program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And last segment of our program on this Memorial Day. You have one more story for us, I think.
Oh, yes, I do. And it's something that parents of gamers need to be very aware of right now. And it's how the Air Force plans to recruit teenage gamers. Forget the Xbox, the U.S. Air Force wants kids to play a game to help it locate future airmen. The strategy of taking advantage of something that's already been invented, and that is the Internet, and it's called big data, said Lieutenant General Stephen Quast, head of Air Education and Training Command. Now, what this service has been collecting, and they say that this is perfectly legal. The service has been collecting data to develop an online game for high school kids. They would play anonymously, identified only by an IP address, Quast said. The service would collect data without violating their privacy. I don't know where he gets that. If they're interested in flying and they see this game the Air Force has, if I find a 15-year-old kid that's just brilliant, I'll probably send a message to that IP address saying, go tell your mom and dad that you are special and that I will offer you a $100,000 signing bonus and I will send you to Harvard for 4 years free.
Well,
Quast told
there
reporters.
Really is an invasion of privacy there. I mean, the fact that they're saying it's only the IP, but everybody's IP is unique.
Yes.
And unless your IP is constantly changing, then yeah, it's as good as any other form of ID. This is not a new idea, by the way.
Yeah.
Some years ago, the Army had something similar out there. They had an online game called, I think it was called America's Army, and you could play for free. And it was both a recruiting tool and a tool to try and identify potential recruits of high value.
Yeah. And if there is an interview set, parents, go with your kid on that interview. Ask the recruiter where the paperwork is that fulfills these promises about signing up with the Air Force.
Well, hang on right there.
Yeah.
Even with paperwork, okay, the courts have repeatedly ruled promises made by recruiters to military recruits are not legally enforceable, even if they're on paper.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
This has come on down before. I mean, they'll say anything to get you to sign that contract. And then, sign on that contract. We're going to make you a pilot. And then you spend your entire time in the Air Force repairing helicopter transmissions. You can't sue them.
No.
You know, and it's basically, you know, you're in the military now, you will do what we tell you, and these promises made by the recruiters are not legally enforceable. They're basically told, yes, we can lie to you to get your kid to sign up, and once we've got the kid signed up, that's going to be it.
Well, you know what the Air Force is desperately needing right now, right?
Pilots.
And recruits for the Predator drone program.
The class that just graduated the Air Force Academy, I think 400 of them are headed for flight training, 60 are headed for the Predator drone, but the Air Force is also recalling to active duty about
over 1,000 people. Yes, I remember.
So they definitely have a shortage of personnel.
Yeah.
But here's our music.
Okay.
So it's the end of our show. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And have yourself a good Memorial Day. Have a safe Memorial Day. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.